folks, let's see, am I live? Allahu Akbar. Right, what does this thing do? Look at that. Allahu Akbar. Right, folks, let's try and shift this. See, does it work like that? Same thing, really. Alright, what the... Allahu Akbar. Alright, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi ta'ala wa barakatuh. Ahlan wa sahlan, folks. Right, I thought maybe a Q&A is long overdue. So, while some people are just logging on, let me mute my phone. Right, so Allahu Akbar. Shaykhana Mahmoud Sha'ban Abu Layth. Those of you who do not know Sheikh Mahmoud Sha'ban, he is a scholar from Misr, from Egypt, a student of the legend Sheikh Ahmad Taha Rayyan, who undoubtedly is one of the most leading authorities on Maliki Fiqh in the world today, an amazing inspiration to us all. So, Sheikh Sha'ban, Barakallahu Feek wa Hafidhak, MashaAllah. Right, guys, so let's see, what are some questions that we may have today, may entertain. I thought, let's just go wild with them. I've been getting some questions, and I'll start just answering some as we're going along. I've had some questions to do with marriage, and people asking me through Snapchat. And in all honesty, I do like the Snapchat forum. So if anybody does want to, I mean, obviously you can ask me questions here, but if... Now that's a pertinent question, Mansoor. Which hair gel do I use? God damn it, what is that? Let's get our priorities sorted out. What is the... I'll actually tell you, I've got a... Remember what... I bought a new one recently, actually, from Dino Hairdressers. Check them out. Awesome they are. But, right, now, let's go to some of these questions. The thing about Snapchat that I was saying, why I like some of those questions, is because when you open them, when you open the question, it's going to disappear. So after you've closed the question, so if you don't respond, you won't get an opportunity to respond. So it forces me, or forces, I'm sure, people to ensure that they respond imminently. Whereas, let's say you, WhatsApp, I'm really bad at responding to people on WhatsApp. Calls, I'm even worse. But I do respond. But let's say you email me or you Facebook me a message, I read the question and think, you know what, I'll respond to that at another time. And then I may just forget, may just get distracted, as you do. Nevertheless, the thing about Snapchat is it doesn't afford you that liberty to kind of just walk away and say, well, you know, so you have to respond there and then once you've opened it. So whilst we're at it, I'll take a question. Now, somebody had asked me about marriages and about forced marriages. Now, just to clarify, forced marriages within Islam are absolutely condemned. There's no such thing. However, somebody had asked about the validity of them. Now, a forced marriage wouldn't really be valid, but we have to differentiate, to be objectively clear, between pressure and force. So they're not the same thing necessarily. So, for example, and I don't mean by that pressure as in the pressure points. I've got a knuckle to a pressure point, and will you accept this nikah? Oh, but the thing is, I mean by that pressure in the sense, like, let's say your family, as it happens in society, they say, oh, oh, you got to get married, come on, or I'm not going to talk to you, or I'm not going to do this, I'm not going to do that. Now that is wrong, but it's not necessarily force by that sense of actual force. So just to be clear and objective, so although it is still wrong to pressurize people, the nikah during just what happens in around the world, their nikah will still be valid. But if the woman, for example, or the husband are unhappy about that situation, I mean, in some cases they may think, look, I don't really want to get married there, but go on then, and then it works out for them. In many cases it may not work out for them. They can just simply go through a talaq, a divorce process. It doesn't mean that their being together is haram all the way. Okay, so just to clarify that, any form of pressure or force is categorically wrong. But force would render the actual contract invalid, because a person is just being coerced to do something. As to pressure, emotional pressure, which people find, or social pressure, or peer pressure, like somebody doesn't want to get married, but he's, come on, you got to get married, what's wrong with you? They're applying peer pressure as we encounter in society. That wouldn't render a relationship, it wouldn't render the contract invalid, although applying pressure to people is wrong. If that couple were unhappy with their situation, they just go through a talaq proceeding, that's all, and they can obtain a divorce. Right, so let's take a look at some of these questions. Alright, we've got just one moment whilst we're dealing. Right, I thought, why not, whilst I'm going to be taking a look at this, why not have a little drink? Boy, has it been hot here today. It has indeed. Could you please explain the justification and justice behind an eternal hell? What the hell? Why did I open that question? I'm struggling to find a rational explanation for eternal punishment. Sorry, my other phone is closing on me. Hope you answer despite it not being a fiqh related question. You see, the thing is, that's a very interesting and difficult question. I can't say that I truly fathom the answer. Sometimes, you see, the amazing thing about Islam is its genuine nature to encourage us to just be honest. And honestly speaking, I don't feel I necessarily fathom that. I don't think many mortals do. Allah has said that in the Quran. I'm just trying to simultaneously open other questions. Right. There have been some views of some ulema right from the Salaf. It's transmitted from some of the Sahaba. I believe there's a transmission from Umar, and I think from Abdullah ibn Mas'ud there's a transmission about hell not being eternal. And that does exist, although that's not the majority position at all. The majority of the Muslims generally all believe in the eternality, in the eternal nature of hell, as do non-Muslims as well, Christians, Jews, and other religions. Why is it like that? Allahu A'lam. I can't answer the why of that, and I'm just being honest about that. And I think it doesn't degrade us sometimes to just be honest. It empowers us to just be objective. And somebody may ask, oh, but you speak about the voice of reason and you say that if it's illogical, it should be debunked. I don't say that. I don't say that. I mean, there's many concepts that sometimes are, you see, there's something which is irrational in the sense that it may sound absurd, and there's some things which are super rational. They're above reasoning. So sometimes it doesn't make them absurd in a way. People asked me a question quite a bit in these recent days. Oh, why do you have to do wudhu to pray? Oh my God, that must be absurd. All this because I criticized an opinion in this day and age in the West, in the UK, for saying women can travel up to 48 miles and beyond that it's haram. And I said it, that, because I criticized that, people started throwing all these kind of ridiculous, questions my way. Oh, I don't want to do wudu. Wudu is absurd. No, it's not. It's not absurd. It's an act of worship. It's a ritual. Rituals by their very nature are super rational. That is not the same as civil liberties, because liberties are to do with human beings. You see, people, if you say to somebody, I worship 5 times a day, they say, well, why not 6? Why not 4? Say, well, that's how it is. That's not absurd. It may be weird, but it's not absurd to people. It's an act of worship. It's a ritual. Saying to somebody, oh, men can do everything, but women can travel, but up to a certain limit, and beyond that they will be damned and deserve the wrath of God. It sounds absurd. It does, and in all honesty, it causes people to doubt the religion and lose trust in it. But anyway, coming back to, I can't answer. It is interesting that some people, they say the same thing about heaven, you see. They say, won't we find heaven boring or paradise boring? And it's interesting how because people say, if you have an infinity of something, wouldn't you just get bored? The truth is, from our perspective right now, we would. But in the Akhirah, we wouldn't have this perspective. And I actually like the way some philosophers, and I believe it may have been Wittgenstein and other people, they looked into eternity and infinity, actually. And they described it more as, so when we're looking at heaven, not as a sense of, because when we look at infinity, we see a linear progression. So I see something like a long line that's never ending. They said, you see, the way some of these people described infinity or eternity is not this linear, non-ending line, but as a sense of timelessness. That it is eternal, it will just go on, but it's a sense of timelessness. And I found that really helpful and consoling to me to understand that. But anyway, I mean, coming back to the person's question, I don't know. There were some positions like I mentioned of Ibn Taymiyyah and other people who said that hell wasn't eternal, but I'm not saying I hold that position. I don't necessarily hold that position, but I think majority of the Muslims don't. So, Allahu A'lam. Let's take a look at some other questions. Allahu Akbar. What are the proofs that we don't have to read the ingredient lists and ask companies if something's halal? Okay, you see, about asking, I mean, there's no harm in asking, but there is a difference between, I think asking is more like for when things are hidden as a communal duty. So some people ask, okay, these things like e-numbers and all of this stuff, you see, this comes back to fiqh, okay, now, which is Islamic law, and there is a huge difference of opinion within Islamic law. So the school of Medina, when it comes to food, a lot fewer things are haram as compared to other schools of law. So within the Maliki tradition, for example, all birds of prey, all birds are halal. Every single creature that lives in the sea, including amphibians that come out of the sea, are still permissible to eat. So crocodiles, crabs, whatever, everything. Even all predatory animals, tigers, lions, wolves, whatever, are only makruh, they're not haram. All insects are not haram. So there's very few things that are actually haram to eat. Things like obviously pig, things like anything that's already dead, things, and that's regardless if it's already dead and hasn't been sacrificed, it would be haram, or if it's been sacrificed for another god, things like this make it haram. Now that as you can imagine opens up like, well, okay, in that case not many things are haram. once again goes back to our ontology of why we would find that quite problematic. That is, by the way, that's not my shadh, weird kind of opinion. That is the school of Medina. So if you open up Mukhtasar Khalil, I could just look at this. I don't even need to. I could just look at that. There's the book on the shelf there. Right, Mukhtasar Khalil. Alright, technology, awesome. Right, so you could just take a look in that. Right, so that's the answer to that. So a lot of these little ingredients, there's also something within the Sharia known as istihala. Can I write on here? Nope, I can't seem to write on here. Otherwise, I would have written the term istihala. And istihala is a kind of chemical property change, or it's a significant, overwhelming property change. It doesn't change it entirely, but it's enough to kind of remove it from its original essence. That renders a lot of things halal. And if you want to listen to my discussion on gelatine, it's on YouTube. If you type in my name and if you type in gelatine, you'll have, I think it's a half an hour or 20-minute discussion explaining the background on that and the details. Okay, so I hope that helps. Right, next question. Right, let's take a look. I'm going to try and backtrack through some of these in case I've missed some people's questions. Right, well, the hair gel, as I said. Alright, okay. There is a question on wife beating. Right, what's that? Sorry, just one moment. What's that? Nobody's there, don't worry guys. Nobody's there. Oh my god, speaking of wife beatings, I have to show you this. This book on talaq, written by this guy, his name's Khashi Haqqi. So I was going through this yesterday. Right, now, I gotta show you guys this, man. This, and you know, then people say to me that why do I say the stuff I say? For God's sake, you know, they're writing books promoting this openly. Right, if I can just find the page where he says, and he says in here that it's absolutely permissible to beat up your wife, and he says that, you know, but obviously he says no, you don't have to do it though. It's not like something, and he says, and if she's decent, well, she wouldn't require a beating. And it's only the ones who ain't decent that require. Can you believe the nonsense people are coming out with? They're writing books with this stuff. And then he says on there that he quotes this mathal. Mathal is like a proverb where he says that about the medicine, that each medicine is different. So he says something about الضرب علاج مر, that beating somebody up is a bitter kind of medication, but it's like, and then he quotes things like he says what did he say? He said something like that Allah has placed a different medication for different matters, and for when the woman is kind of rebelling and out of hand, well, that's what we've got. Well, that's when we medicate her with a beating. Can you know, it's oh god, I mean, it's I'm just going to end up dropping the phone. But can you believe, seriously, that this is the kind of stuff that people are openly, they're writing books saying this, and they're saying that this is Islam, and when this was actually the page, let me show it to you. So if you can see there, he says, ومن حكمة الخالق سبحانه أنه جعل الدواء متغيرا ليناسب كل حالة. And then he mentions ويقضي على تمرد الزوجة. So he can kind of deal with the rebellious nature. And he says والضرب وإن كان مباحا شرعا. And even though it is permissible to beat up, but the ulema say it's better not to do it. And then down here he says, look, وقد جاء where you got this when my thumb is. وَقَدْ جَاءَ فِي he says, فِي الْحِكْمِ وَالْأَمْثَالِ, in this book, there's an old proverb, الضرب علاج مر قد يستغني عنه الكريم الحر. It says that, look, beating is a bitter kind of medication, although he says that the free person, as opposed to the slave person who has and then he says the honorable free person, obviously, perhaps due to his upbringing, etc., doesn't need it. Ya Allah, ya Allah. You know, and then they asked me why I say the things I do. And then they kind of mock me about saying Mufti Blackbeard and Mufti this and Mufti that, and, you know, modern Muftis. And for God's sake, I'd take my modern stuff, thank you very much, over this. You see, look, it's not even, I mean, obviously those issues are problematic, but it's sometimes it's not even these issues. What the issue is pushing it under the banner of Islam. That is the issue. You know, culture is weird, you know, whatever, is freaky, it can be good. If people push certain things as culture, it's not so much of an issue. The issue is when we start saying, oh, this is Allah and His Messenger, then people lose faith in Allah and His Messenger. Right, okay, moving on. You said that, but I'm assuming this is with the caveat that a chaperone is always present with the suitor and prospective bride. Okay, this is an interesting question. How do we get to meet people nowadays? Well, there's a particular club where everybody hangs out. No. That's haram. Is it? It's alright, people, I'm high. The thing is, we really do struggle because we live in different societies. You know, in the Prophet's time and in certain parts of the world today, everybody grows up kind of knowing people. So they grow up, they all know each other, you know, they grew up, played as kids, hung out, did whatever, they're all normal, they're natural. And then as they grow older, okay, there may be some, first of all, extreme segregation is un-Islamic. Okay, I don't care what anybody says. That's not what Islam teaches us. Right from the most sacred of places, the Kaaba, you know, the Haram al-Mukarram, whether it's Mecca, Tawaf is not segregated. The Prophet could have segregated it. Right from the holiest of places to the marketplaces. In the Prophet's time, it was not segregated in the way people think, or the way some places, like let's say today, societies like in Afghanistan, I'm not dissing Afghanistan, but let's just say as an example, or in Saudi Arabia, or in many parts of Saudi, not all of Saudi Arabia, but the Islamic parts. Or in places, maybe some parts of Pakistan, whatever, the way you have that kind of extreme segregation is not of it doesn't resemble what was in the Prophet's time anyway. Now, coming back to this point, if there is this extreme segregation, and in this day and age, we don't grow up knowing people, because, you know, we live in huge cities and, or in huge kind of, you know, developed parts of the world now, and massive population, so people don't know each other. And then you have on top of that extreme segregation, and then you have everybody covered up. How do you get to know people? How do you get to choose? How do you get to... This is a problem. I mean, what is the solution to it? I don't have a solution. I can just, like many of you, identify that there is a problem there. And then people will say, oh, but can I do this? Can I do that? The truth is, ulema are not going to be prepared to just give you an answer, because then they're going to say, well, they're going to get slated for it. And that's, in all honesty, what the situation is. I mean, if people, you know, I don't know how people are going to get to know each other and people can use social media, and then people will say, yeah, but people abuse social media. I'm sure they do abuse social media, but then what do you expect people to do? You know, this, oh, I've got an auntie who knows all these wonderful guys, or knows all these knows all these wonderful guys would be a bit concerning. She knows all these wonderful women, let's say. I mean, whoever trusts her choice, for God's sake. I mean, can you ever imagine standing with her and thinking, yeah, what would you think of this girl? I mean, that's just crazy, isn't it? Like, say, oh, so people, they say, okay, well, fine, go on, then you just look for me. And then she's going to say, oh, I've got this awesome girl. And people are going to be like, yeah, but I'm not really feeling it. But then they're going to get the pressure. They're not going to know where else to go. Then they get married. And this isn't about just looks or anything. I'm not saying this is about looks, just to clarify that. Next thing I'm getting slated for saying, oh my God, Mufti said everything's about look. I did not say that. Okay. But the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ says, Unzur ila ma yad'uka ila nikahiha. Look at whatever calls you to her, to wanting to be with her. I mean, look at whatever does that. That's the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ. It's a sahih hadith. I'm not going to interpret it. I'm going to leave it to you guys as it said. Okay. So the thing is now, and people have different things. You know, some people, I know people, friend of mine, I don't know if he's logged on. I don't think but he's into really fat women. And, you know, that you may think, so somebody may think, is he? And he is. And some people are into slimmer women, and some people are into tall women, and I know somebody who's into really short women, and vice versa as well. Women would be attracted to different kinds of men. Some would be attracted to, I don't know, whatever, white, dark, whatever, different, Chinese, Oriental, you name it. I mean, different, tall, short, I don't know, but everybody's different, and Allah has allowed people. This is it's a lifestyle thing. It's natural. It's meant to be natural. But people have turned this into like a very ritualistic. I knew somebody who once went to discuss marriage with somebody. And normally he's an awesome, I won't go too much into it. I don't want you to find out, some of you to find out who he is. But the guy was well established in terms of his dunya, you know, business, career, whatever. Very well established kind of guy. All settled, ready for marriage. So when he's speaking, sorry about that, I think the connection on the Wi-Fi just was a bit intermittent. When he's speaking to this woman, he's saying things like, the conversation was like this, Assalamu alaikum, right, okay, how are you? I am prepared to give you £400 pocket money every month. I will also expect this in return. You will need to cook, clean, this. I will not like you to be asking me about this. I will require of you A, B, and C. I mean, what? As you can imagine, she got up and was out of there before you can imagine it. She's like, oh, I'm sorry, I didn't realize I'd come here to sell myself into slavery. I mean, be human beings, what the hell? When he told me that, I said, seriously, is that how you spoke to her? Are you joking or are you for real? He said, I'm for real. I said, why would you speak to anybody like that? Why are you acting like a robot all of a sudden? Why ain't you... What happened to just being your normal... I mean, how about a decent conversation about something? How about a bit of humor, for God's sake? How about a bit of... You know, at the end of the day, you want to speak to somebody to get married to them. You're not kind of trying to, I don't know, hire a builder. Anyway, you see, but this is what people do. And then they will justify this from, obviously, Quran and Sunnah, get there, and anybody who goes against. But khair, but these are some of the problems. These problems, you see, I kind of see this under a form of social autism almost. But khair, that's not in any way to detract or people who are autistic. This is a social kind of autism. I'm applying that from a social narrative. Let's take a look at some other questions. Right. Abigail, shukran, barakallahu feek. Right, I appreciate you. That at least that means my voice is coming through. Where is the best place to study Dars-e-Nizami in the UK, London? I don't know. There are some great established madrasas in the UK. I think places like London. I think Kent has a madrasa. What else around London? I think Kent is the only one that's coming to my mind. I don't know if they have any other famous Darul Ulooms there. Obviously, you've got Bury, which is up north. Places like Blackburn, established. These kind of places are there. Just trying to think. These are the kind of established institutes where you could even board and things like that. So, but it doesn't mean that they will be perfect. I don't think any place is perfect. But I think if you have the zeal, you can take knowledge. You can go there, and it doesn't come down to it's not about bricks and mortar. It's about it's about you. You are the vessel. You will go there and you will just be a sponge. You will absorb every piece of knowledge that you can get. Take the good, and you will come across, unfortunately, a lot of challenges in these places as well, mainly cultural. I mean, I've studied Dars-e-Nizami. I know you will face a lot of cultural kind of barriers, people looking down on certain attitudes, certain things about being open-minded. They don't like that sometimes. They're very cultural, very Indo-Pak kind of culture. But, you know, if you're going there, you just bear with it if that's where you are going. Alternatively, you can study in other places, and you can always look abroad. You can places like Al-Azhar, places like Zaytuna in Tunis, the classic Zaytuna. Obviously, there's the other Zaytuna, which is amazing too, but the classic Zaytuna and the Qarawiyyin. So I think all of these are, you know, amazing places of learning, inshallah. Right, okay. Name your favorite book. If you did nikah, do you also have to get married in the secular court? That's a good question. Nikah in this part of the world is not an automatic registration, so it is separate, as is divorce as well. So your talaq is not your like your civil divorce is not an Islamic divorce unless the person specifically intended that. But by default it isn't. Likewise, your nikah is not a state registered marriage. So just to be clear on that. Okay. So if you've got any, if you do want to register, some people choose not to register, some people choose to register. I mean, I ain't going to really comment. I don't believe in telling people how to live their lives. Okay. I believe, you have a choice. You are a grown human being, you know, you are a mature, intelligent, person, adult. You can make your own choice. There's pros and cons with everything. The fact that you want to get married, who do you want to get married to, how do you want to live, should you register this, shouldn't you register, it's your choice, it's your life, you're going to live it. Just think about it and do as you feel fit and best for yourself. I want to ask off top, is it a bad time keeping haram or just disliked? Keeping haram or just, I'm not sure what that question means. Is it true that one can perform their own nikah? Yes, they can, absolutely. Performing a nikah isn't actually that difficult, but it's just because people don't know the conditions and they want to make sure it's valid. Then in that case, having an imam or a maulvi or a sheikh or a scholar come and do that is great, because they know exactly what they're doing. They're going to explain the conditions. They're going to give you a few words as guidelines. So it's awesome to get it done through, and they will give you the documentation as well, so you have records of it. Right. Can a marriage go ahead without a father's consent? This is a good question. It's a classic question of the wali. They call the guardian the wali in Arabic. Is the wali a shartun fi sihhat al-nikah? Everybody agrees that the wali, it is ideal to have the wali as part of the nikah. Everybody accepts that it is ideal. What about when it's not possible for some reason, like the father disagrees to the marriage but the girl wants to get married anyway? Does she have the right to go ahead? There's been a classic difference of opinion. The madhab of Imam Abu Hanifa and several Malikis as well are of the understanding that it is not a condition for the nikah, for the validity of nikah. So when the Prophet ﷺ said, La nikaha illa bi wali, that there's no, that where he emphasized this about there is no nikah except with a wali, they said that by this he was emphasizing it as a shartu kamal, as a condition to make something perfect. And also he was addressing his society at the time. because it was a very kind of tribal society where people may have done sometimes some crazy, they may react in a crazy way. And this is why Imam Malik as well, and this is where they draw this understanding from Imam Malik, because when he's asked about it, he says, oh, well, it is a condition. So this is why many Malikis said it's a must. But then he says, oh, but Ammad Daniya. He says the woman who's not from a high kind of tribe, or she doesn't have that tribal backing. He says for her, it wouldn't bother me so much if she didn't have a wali. Now this became very interesting, that, oh, really? So that's interesting. So how is that? Because if it's a clear command from God, then you can't vary it like this. So that means that this is subject and contingent upon your circumstances. So the fact that this means that there's some reasoning behind this. So, and then people understood that, well, it was to maintain the peace and to not cause conflicts. But in this day and age, in the UK, you see, once again, I'm not telling people to go ahead and do things like that, but I'm not telling them it's not allowed either. I do believe, my personal understanding is with that. I believe it was Imam Bukhari as well, and I've got a whole actual piece of work dedicated to this, which I wanted to do a piece on actually once. On this whole hadith. Yahya ibn Ma'in and many other muhaddithin, including Imam Ahmad, said that there was nothing, and I believe Imam Bukhari too, said that this bab has nothing clearly sahih in it. Like, it does have sahih, it has some sound narrations, but they've been problematized. Now, to problematize a hadith, it isn't just the chain. There's the chain, but there's ilal as well. There's hidden kind of defects which may not appear as defects to the common eye, but the trained scholar sees and recognizes a defect for what it is. Now, these people, Yahya ibn Ma'in said there was nothing sahih in this entire chapter. Other scholars, I believe Imam Bukhari and Imam Ahmad, I believe, when they were asked, they said that although they don't feel there was something conclusive, now my word conclusive, in this chapter, but they said they were still prepared to go with it. This ruling of having it as a condition, despite there not being something conclusive. So that's an interesting point. And the madhabs, like I mentioned, that of Imam Abu Hanifa, and also Imam, there were other madhabs as well, like At-Tabari, Ibn Jarir At-Tabari, and so on. But people like Imam Malik and his fatwa, as well as understood by a certain Malikiya, that it is not a condition. So what else is there? What is the limit of intellect? Allah says people are deaf, dumb who don't use intellect. If so, what's the limit? I mean, that's a very philosophical question. What is the limit? I mean, I don't know, because if we knew the limit, we would know. It's like, can you think of the unthinkable? Of course you can't, because if you could think of it, then it wouldn't be the unthinkable. It's a difficult question. I think people have unnecessarily had this debate of aql versus naql. Naql meaning transmission, or the intellect, and people start to see the two as contradistinctions, and they are opposed to each other at times. I don't think that's true, and I love the way Imam Sheikh Hamza Yusuf said people who just go on about that are like naql heads. Gotta love Sheikh Hamza. But the thing is that it's not actually, you see, it's as Imam Fakhruddin al-Razi, he explains it very well. I would say anybody who wants to have an understanding of that discussion, go to his tafsir, and you can read he has a section in the beginning, actually, where he's highlighting that is there a ta'arud, is there a clash or a conflict between intellect and text, a textual kind of reasoning, and he says no, that there isn't. And he gives a very good understanding that, look, everything ultimately is based on comprehension. Like, you couldn't have, like, when you're reading something, it's only making sense to you because you have reasoning. So to understand reasoning as something separate doesn't make any sense. Language only makes sense to you because you have reason. So, but that's not to say, so some people say, oh, so you mean, so it's all about the aql, it's all about the intellect, we should just throw away tradition, throw away text. Don't be silly. I mean, stop having a tantrum, goddammit. Who on earth said that? This is an amazing deen. It's an amazing, it's something that Allah is constantly saying, إِنَّا أَنزَلْنَاهُ قُرْآنًا عَرَبِيًّا لَعَلَّكُمْ تَعْقِلُونَ, in the hope that you become a people of intellect. أَفَلَا يَتَدَبَّرُونَ الْقُرْآنَ أَمْ عَلَى قُلُوبٍ أَقْفَالُهَا. Do they not ponder over the Quran, or do their hearts have a kind of seal on them? Allah is calling you to tadabbur, to tafakkur, to take a look. وَمِنْ آيَاتِهِ, and from His signs you will see this, the اختلاف ألوانكم, the differences of your colors, your tongues, your languages, your cultures. You will see this in وَفِي الْآفَاقِ, and in the horizons you will see His sign. وَفِي أَنفُسِكُمْ أَفَلَا تُبْصِرُونَ, and in yourselves, do you not have insight? Do you not see that? So I think it's a straw man argument to kind of say, well, this, is it about reason? Is it about text? Obviously it's about text, but texts are only understood through reasoning. To deny reason would render everything just nonsensical. Right, okay, what is the real meaning of jihad? Allah! Move in. Wait a minute, my internet's gone off. Ah! Well, I should do that. Wait. What is the real meaning of jihad? Right. I need a drink. Think. Look, the meaning is what it is. Okay. Jihad is what it is. It can be applied to many things. People say by definition it's a struggle. And people say, does it apply to your internal struggle? Yes, it does. Does it apply to things like struggling to seek knowledge? Yes, it does. And does it apply to having good character and making social change? Yes, it does. Does it even apply to a military aspect? Yes, it does. I mean, I think I've already answered this as well. There's a short YouTube clip of mine, you can check it out, on how to handle the ISIS narrative. Is to tackle the bull by the horns, to reclaim our true narrative. Don't need to be cowards in the sense of, I mean, I don't think it's being cowards. I think I understand people are intimidated and sometimes they want to distance themselves, but that just reinforces the ISIS narrative and this kind of extreme narrative, because they say that, watch, these ulema will deny that jihad even exists. And what do the ulama do? They do exactly that. So it just reinforces the belief of those people. Of course it exists. Every kind of civilization has had a military aspect to it, and Islam throughout its history has had a military aspect. And people have argued, is it defensive, is it offensive? I mean, I would say historically speaking, today obviously we don't have a Muslim kind of civilization like that. We just have different countries. But the concept of a military existence and military, whether it's defense or offense, exists with every state, with every kind of civilization, with every nation today. So if you're going to go to any country, that country will have a sense of sovereignty and it will have that understanding. And Islam has that too. I mean, it's not, it's nothing. Islam never has claimed to be pacifist, against the concept of violence altogether, but it is a religion of compassion and mercy, or it ought to be. Ought to be. Unfortunately, it's been hijacked. Sorry. Oh, no. Delete everything I said. The thing is that, so I hope that answers your question. Okay. Do we have free will? Oh, that's going to take forever trying to answer that. Istihala, transmutation. Whoa, Mustafa, is that you with the big words? Yeah, a kind of, yeah, sure, transmutation. Mutation might sound horrible though. I don't know if the word transmutation sounds horrible, but mutation isn't that negative, but if it's not negative, then yes, like a transition. It has a change, a transition. Let's see, Jawad's got a question. Does a fard ghusl in the Maliki only remove major impurity, as you have to wash all over, which would include washing the major areas? Would this mean you have to do wudhu? Okay, if you've done ghusl, you do not need to repeat your wudhu. The taharatul kubra tashmal that it includes a taharat al-sughra. Okay, any minor purification is included in the major purification. So it's like saying, if you buy fully comprehensive insurance, you don't need to worry about third party. People are going to say, what, is insurance even haram? Remember that advert, not that advert, that interview? She said, what? I said, yeah. She said, what? I said, what? She said, yeah. I need that woman giving some of my fiqh lessons. They asked, is it jaiz? He said, yeah. He said, what? I said, yeah. So, okay, next question. This phone, it keeps... God. You know when you have so many locks on your phone? A controversial one. Are tattoos haram? Ooh. Can I just pass on that one? The thing is, I only... Would it be okay to say I honestly don't know? Because there have been some... The majority of the ulema have always considered them haram. There's been some ulema, some Malikiya, who said they were makruh and not haram. But the thing is, because there was never a culture where tattoos were common. So like, obviously, small tattoos were like kind of, what do you call them, tribal, Bedouin, or, you know, you go to some rural areas and the women put little dots and stuff like this. And that did exist in the Muslim world. But tattoos like the way that we have them today, like you're going to have your kind of like bicep and you're going to have like all these tribal signs over them. And that didn't exist historically like that as a predominant Muslim culture. Now, because it didn't exist, there was no motivation for the ulama to kind of, or for anybody who may have even felt partial to it, to argue for it. Because it was kind of just a hypothetical question, which really, and tattoos historically, I think were pretty ugly as well. So I think you can't see why anybody would have argued in defense of it. Because it wouldn't have, because they were just seen as a kind of mutilation or just some kind of tribalistic thing. And it didn't really enhance the beauty of people. Today, obviously, that leaves us today, and the problem is, if you answer it, I honestly don't know. I do know historically there was some Malikiya. I think Qarafi shows a bit of leniency towards. I think there's Zanati, is it, who says it's makruh, and but besides them, generally the ulama say it's forbidden. Okay, next question, quick, run. I gotta throw that away, goddammit, that can men wear gold? Islamically, no, they can't. Look at that, did I just say no? Did I just say no? Woo! Mufti Abu Layth just said no to something. What just happened? God damn. Cheers to that, folks. That is, by the way, that's only Red Bull mixed with Coke, in case you're wondering. Explains why I'm so high. I need to hit the gym after this. Right, so, can men wear gold? No, they cannot. No, they cannot. No, you cannot. This deserves to be one of those strict. Where's my sword? Where's my sword? Where's my sword? Naam. It's only a display piece, people, just in case you get freaked out. Right, but you can't wear gold. Why do all restrictions in Islam seem to be for women? Hina, I hear you, but what can we say? Unfortunately, you see, you challenge these things, and you've probably witnessed the backlash I've got for challenging what I have. I think something like 7 or 8 separate posts were made and different, circulated en masse on Facebook just against me for ridiculing that statement. But you're right. And what people don't understand is that this seriously endangers the faith of people. Because Islam is a deen of reason. it is something that should make sense. The Prophet, we have this teaching. Aisha said, "Nazzilun nas manazilahum." You have in the other hadith, "Hadithun nas qadra uqulihim." Speak to people with reason. "Atuhibbu an yukadhab Allah wa rasuluhu." Would you want that Allah and His Messenger are denied because of what you're saying? I've been, in all honesty, been hurt almost. It's not like me to get emotional, but I've been almost hurt with the response by people on this matter. That they feel that it's okay to say people can disbelieve as long as my authority doesn't get called into question. And this is one of the reasons I'm so glad I'm not an imam in a masjid. I'm 100% independent. Like I have nothing to do with, so I can just go anywhere. I can speak. I can speak my mind. I can do whatever I want. But I just feel that is unacceptable to have this kind of aloof, attitude. Because I know that the ulema, and this isn't an attack on ulema, because most ulema are amazing people. But there are some people out there that I don't fear kufr for the clergy. Okay, there may be some of them that do fall into, by kufr I don't mean the takfir, you're kafir, but I mean actually disbelieving in God. I don't fear that for the clergy. Okay, because the clergy they're so, it's been so drilled into them. It's a way of life. Way of life sounds nice, but it's in their DNA now, that this is what they are. I fear this for the common and regular Muslims. I very closely follow a lot of atheist professors. I follow their lectures. I listen to, many people on YouTube, on podcasts. I almost on a daily basis, or at least every other day, listen to a lecture by some atheist professor. Whether it's going to be Dawkins, whether it's going to be, there's so many. You get actually some good ones. People like Dr. David Sloan, or who's written some very interesting things. Not so harsh, by the way, he isn't. But very interesting. Darwin's Cathedral, he's written and stuff about how evolution also works in a social manner, as opposed to just just upon biologically, as a social feature too. But my point is, I listen to some of them. I was listening to a lecture by, I think there's a Dr. Dan Darrell, and he's speaking about the God virus and sex, actually, and how sex has been reappropriated by many primates, and especially amongst them human beings, how they've reappropriated that, and how religion always condemns sex, and how it makes it dirty and this taboo. Okay. And I was just listening to the research that you were showing. But he had this interesting part where he's guiding people. He's training them as atheists. How do you tackle people of religion? And it's interesting, like he says that he's giving them tips, and he says, look, always resort to, he says, speak reason. Because he says most religion people, most of these like religion kind of the God squad, they do not speak reason. He said, secondly, he says, use humor. And he's telling them, he says, humor and wit, these things will go a long way. And it's amazing really and people like Sam Harris, very good at that, amazing. I listen to loads of Sam Harris. I actually can't stop laughing at some of his jokes and stuff like this. It doesn't mean I agree with, I actually do sometimes, you see, when he's ridiculing people that are being stupid, like I can't help but laugh along, because I do find it, like I agree that is being ridiculous. Like, when he says, I love the way he says this one point. He says, he's tackling somebody, and he says, you know what? He says, actually, the world 500 years ago, people were very clear. They had so much clarity of thought. And people say, and everybody's listening attentively. He says, yes. He says, in the medieval ages, they were actually incredibly clear. He goes, they had these sophisticated ways of understanding the world with more clarity than perhaps we do today. And then he says, so at the time you had things like earthquakes, famines and droughts and disasters, and And he says, and these incredibly intelligent, educated men had got together, and they had actually precisely calculated the reason why all of this was happening. And everybody's so eager, and I'm so eager, thinking, "Whoa, really? What was it?" And he says it was because the witches had just casted a spell. So he goes, and they had calculated this with precision. They knew which witch it was, and they knew how to now get rid of the problem. All you had to do was burn her, and it was a very calculated, methodical process. And but seriously, you can't help but this mentality, it exists. I don't believe that's Islam to think like that, but I do think that's institutionalized religion. But I think Islam was a deen. It wasn't meant, it did take on in some places the face of an institutionalized religion, but it was naturally a way of life. It wasn't about being it's taken that form in some places, but that's not what it was. It was like Millat Ibrahim. It was something, it was to do with the fitrah, about harmony, to do with your intuitions, to do with living through life naturally as a human being. So and these people don't look at this kind of stuff, and this is why people end up disbelieving, you see. And so my point, it does seem very harsh on women. Everything is about restrictions on women. Men can do this, women can't do this. Men can they can travel, women can't do that. Men can do, go do this, women can't do that. And then somebody said to me, "Oh, really? If it's all about equality, why don't you tell women to just walk around naked?" And I haven't said that, by the way, in case somebody goes, "Oh my God." Look, I said, look, it's not absurd for a religion or for a way of life or for any civilization or to advise and guide towards modesty. It's not absurd. Why is modesty absurd? Why would you think that being modestly covered is a kind of absurdity? It's not. Men and women are different from that aspect. Biologically, psychologically, men are driven to the apparent. Women are as well, but men are much more often driven to the apparent, sexualized, the anatomy of a woman, much more so perhaps than women are. And that makes sense. It's nothing, that's not me just saying that. That's why in adverts you're going to have women all naked kind of advertising things. Why aren't you going to have men all naked advertising things? Because it doesn't work the same way. Obviously, people do admire good physiques. You do need to hit the gym, guys. People do admire good physiques, but it's not the same thing. Like, it doesn't, by seeing, maybe there may be some odd cases, but in the norm, I'm speaking according to the norm and psychological reports, the way men will respond to anatomy, it's not always as immediate, the kind of immediate gratification that they want is not always the same with women. So this, for people to say to me, "Oh, you're calling towards equality, so why don't you ask women to uncover and to be all kind of naked and stuff like that?" I think that's an absurd kind of request, and I think they haven't actually understood what I'm saying. It's not absurd to call towards modesty. It's noble to call towards modesty. Okay, that's not the same as trying to say to women, "Oh, you got to walk around, you can't even show your face, you got to wear gloves, you got to do this, no." Why do you have to do that? Like, I know these positions exist, but it doesn't necessarily, if it's not Quran and Sunnah, then, we can respect it in its own right, but do we have to be bound by it? That's my question. And as far as these travel restrictions and other restrictions, you can't do this, you can't, I was reading yesterday on the papers, in Arabic papers it was online. I was reading something about, in Saudi Arabia, they have something called al-waraqat al-safra, that translates as the yellow card. And for a woman to obtain a passport, she has to have one of her male family members sign off for her this yellow card. And if they don't sign it, then she can't obtain a passport, because she can't have free movement without kind of consent from one of her walis. Wallahi, I find that ridiculous. And, people may attack me for saying that but I'm just calling it as it is. I feel things. I was reading that article, and these were Muslim women saying that they kind of resent the faith because it's being shoved down. It's down their throats in such a way, and I feel that it's all about patriarchy. It's all about control. People live in patriarchal societies. I recognize that may be their way of life. I don't agree with, but it's their way. But don't sugarcoat it with Islam. Don't kind of paint over it saying this is Islam. Because when people then want to deny your patriarchy, they will deny Allah and His Messenger. And we don't have a right to do that. You see, look, I might want to do something. I might do wrong things. You might do wrong things. And fair enough. But when I start saying, okay, Allah is telling you to using this emotional blackmail, then the greater message gets compromised. Right, okay, next question. Let's move on, folks. People are going to be like, what the hell? Regarding sleep and salah, can you explain why if you sleep through a prayer time, you aren't sinful? Okay, now there's two things here. You see, there's an understanding that if, like, let's say, if it's salah time now, let's say it's Maghrib time, and I know I've got so much time to pray, or let's say it's Asr time. That's a better example. During the day it's Asr time. Now I can pray Asr till sunset, and I think, I'm just chilling, and Allah gives me that freedom to just chill. So I'm chilling, I'm thinking, I'm just knocking back a drink or something. I don't really feel like I'll pray in a little while. Then I say, well, I've got an hour left. I know, why don't I just take a nap? Now that would be wrong if it's because it's very unlikely. I'm not just judging by me. There may be people out there that actually have naps that last for 10 minutes. My naps usually last about 2 hours. So the thing is, if I'm going to take a nap, then I know I ain't going to wake up and pray Asr. And I'm in Asr time. So I would say that you do have to pray Asr before you take a nap. Now that's not the same as going to sleep at night and not waking up for Fajr. Because you were asleep when the time of obligation came upon you. Whereas in this Asr example, you were awake. You were just sitting and the time of Asr had come on. So the responsibility had now already descended upon your shoulders and you chose to ignore it. That's different to I'm asleep, and let's say I go to sleep at Dhuhr time. Or I go to sleep, whatever, someday I think, I'm going to take a little nap. But for some reason I sleep right through till the evening. Now, I didn't intend that. So, okay, I got overcome with whatever. That's fine. As soon as you wake up, just pray. But it's not the same as kind of out of laziness, okay? Abdul Awwal, is that the Abdul Awwal? I don't know if it is. If it is, Assalamu alaikum. Fi kulli hal, Assalamu alaikum, Abdul Awwal. There's Sheikh Abdul Awwal, if it is that one who's a scholar, somebody I spent many years studying abroad with as well. So if it is you, ahlan wa sahlan, and it's an honor to have you on here. Can men dye their hair black? Yes, they can. That's absolutely permissible. It has been there is a disagreement upon it. The Maliki madhab is generally fine with it, as is, I believe, Abu Yusuf from the Hanafiya. He's fine with it as well. Right, okay, I'm dying. Alright, Bilal. Al-Bradfordy. Doing it. You're moving cam too much. Sorry. Apologies. I gotta get something like a stand for this, but I kind of like being able to sometimes just move it around, but I'm sure it kind of makes you guys go mad. Shout out to the... Why is it classified as khalwa in the modern age? That's a good question. Sorry about that. Somebody just tried to Facebook call me and just interrupted my session. Thanks. Right, so khalwa in the modern age is, I would say, it's something that can directly lead to something like people having a sexual encounter. I know somebody could say, well, I suppose anything could lead to it. I don't believe, in my understanding, as many contemporary ulema have said, that in the workplace, so if you're in an office and there's a woman there, I don't believe that to be khalwa. That's what many ulama today have said. I'm with them on that. There are other people who disagree with that, and that's the, because this is not the place where you're gonna, it's very unlikely, and it's not unlikely that you can't have an affair, but you could have an affair without even being in that room. The fact that you work, you see somebody, you contact them, that's always a possibility. The fact that you're in this room right now, an office space or a working space, or you're in a shop and somebody comes in, or you're a taxi driver, or I don't consider these things to classify as that kind of khalwa, although I admit it can lead to that. There is a difference of opinion on this. Many ulema have said this today from around the world as well, especially within the UK as well. I believe within the UK, I think Sheikh Juday had done a piece on this before at some point, saying that, and internationally, many of the Al-Azhari ulema have said stuff like that. I do also am of that understanding that khalwa would be defined by its urfi context, its kind of conventional understanding. In this day and age, if you're in an office, it's very unlikely, unless you run that office, it's a different thing, but it's very unlikely you're going to be at it in the office. I'm not saying it doesn't happen, but I'm saying it's unlikely. But where it happens, it could happen anywhere like that then. And those rare cases are like with anything then. It could happen like that in a shop. So, I'm just saying, okay. That's my understanding, wallahu a'lam. What's your views on, what's HFA? I don't know what that is. Fiqh over Skype or run classes in Brom. I am going to start those classes. There's, inshallah, within Birmingham, Alam Rock, there's a centre called the Ark. We will be teaching classes from there very soon, inshallah. So it's my bad for being a bit lazy on. People have been asking me for a while, and I've said, and I'm happy to do it. Just been doing a few other things, distracted, but yes. Let's get some questions. Can you briefly right, there's going to be so much. My Shahzad Sadazai seeking knowledge, I think I've answered that in depth. There is also a bio done of mine on Facebook. One of my students did it, but the thing is, it's got a lot of details in there. But very briefly, I mean, I studied initially in the UK. I learned Arabic. I studied from a book, Dr. Surti's Quranic Arabic. I must have learnt that within about 5 months. I then went to a few classes here. My Arabic, I did some basic Arabic grammar here, did some basic fiqh. I think within a year, my Arabic was okay here. I then went abroad. I spent about a year and a half in Damascus in the late 90s. Then I went to Pakistan, and I came back to Damascus on a few occasions. So I came another time, spent about 3-4 months, went back, came back. In between, I studied in Islamabad. I completed Hifz of the Quran. Then I completed my Alim course in Karachi, and I completed my Mufti course in Karachi. Then I came back, and in between, since I've come back, I've kept links. Since I have been to some places, spent a few weeks in Al Azhar. I visit Morocco very frequently, meet the ulema there, benefit from them. I try and establish links wherever I can, really. So I hope that's of some help. The main thing is, people, wallahi, I can't overemphasize how awesome it is to seriously study this thing. It will be, if any of you, if even one of you take that advice on board, your life will never, in a positive sense, be the same again. And you will be so grateful that you actually listened to that. Arabic is not a difficult language to clock. Just give it 20-25 minutes every day. You can work through it. Within a year, you will have good level Arabic. It's like I did a part-time degree in psychology. It took me 6 years here. Like, think about it. It would take you, by that time, if you studied 6 years part-time, you would be at a scholarly status almost. So it's awesome. Do it if you can. A woman going into the masjid teach during her hayd. What is the Maliki position on this? Generally, many of the ulema felt about a woman entering the masjid on her menstruation she shouldn't do that. Some ulama disagreed with that. The understanding, some of the Malikiyah, like Muhammad ibn Maslama, student of Imam Malik, his understanding was she can. There's no harm in a woman going in to the masjid during her menstruation. That was the understanding of Imam Shafi'i as well, I believe. I would say, look, if that masjid is cool with that, if that's something, a masjid should have a functioning aspect run and delivered by women, really. And if that is the case, then yeah, why not? I would personally agree with the understanding of Muhammad ibn Maslama that she can do that. Wallahu a'lam. As long as it's not going to cause all hell ain't going to break loose in a masjid. And it shouldn't do. So inshallah. If you don't study in the UK locally that bad because you haven't studied with great scholars. I'm not sure. Is that a question about should you go abroad studying Al-Azhar? If so, then definitely. If you can go abroad, do so. Mufti Kamani, Allahu Akbar. I'm totally honoured. Totally. Those of you who don't know, this is our US stateside legend, Mufti Hussain Kamani. Close and dear friend, inshallah, who's on here. Now I have to actually be careful about what I say. Make sure I'm saying everything accurately and correctly. Nah, he's super chilled, by the way, so he's awesome. Which ulema have allowed women to pluck their eyebrows? Well, it definitely wasn't Cyclops. Was it No. I mean, there's been, the Maliki madhab generally is of the understanding, if you pick up the texts of Ad-Dardir or the Suqi's Hashia, and if you read through where it speaks about this, it's in the final sections where they speak about can women pluck their eyebrows, they will say that yes they can, and that hadith is relating to the woman during her mourning period. So the woman who is on an iddah is going through the iddah of her husband having passed away. So that 4 months and 10 days that's mentioned in the Quran, that iddah, during that she wasn't meant to do this. That was the take by many of the later Malikiya. Many of the Malikiya who commented on this hadith. Some of the Hanbalis like Ibn al-Jawzi, not Ibn Qayyim al-Jawzi, but Ibn al-Jawzi, his understanding was it was permissible, and the Prophet only condemned that because there was some kind of prostitute women at the time in Medina that were getting a bit popular, and his understanding is this. And the Prophet said this to kind of or maybe I don't know whether they were actually from Medina or from the outskirts of Medina, but they were there in that time, and some women were starting to copy them in their trends, and therefore the Prophet condemned that. That's his understanding. Osman, sorry, what's your question? I think you're ignoring me. Osman Khan, I'm not ignoring you. What's your take on Tablighi Jamat? Tablighi Jamat. I don't have a take on them in the sense of, I think, alhamdulillah, like many things, there's many great things and there's some drawbacks, like many movements. The Tablighi Jamat is something that when I first began practicing in my teens, they helped me a lot. Although I'm not from that background, I'm not from a kind of Tablighi background, but they did help me, and I think it would be ungrateful of me to not acknowledge that. So, they didn't actually lead me to seeking knowledge, but because of them, I ended up eventually taking the deen seriously, and then eventually getting more interested and wanting to learn, and I'm forever indebted for that aspect. In fact, as a child, when I was about 17 actually, so I was so eager, 16 actually, I was so eager to go on Jamaat. My family wouldn't actually allow me to go on Jamaat. My parents, because my family weren't really, we're not from like a practicing background, and my family kind of saw these people as generally as kind of like Wahhabis or something, and they didn't really want me to go on Jamaat with them. They're very strict about that. That you can't go. Basically we don't want you doing anything like. And I was so eager to go that I actually, and I don't advise this, but I actually ran away from home just to go on Jamaat as a. But in a way, it kind of changed the trajectory of my life. Actually, that action did. In other ways, in a sense, it had huge ramifications that were indirect ramifications. So. It definitely, it was a huge step, and I think I subsequently went through a huge ordeal with my own family when I tried to come back. And they were like, well, don't know if you're going to come back now. So, I mean, I was only 16 at the time, but it was a huge thing, really, a huge step I took. But there's some amazing people. So I absolutely adore that side. They have amazing characteristics. Character is awesome with them. That said, I think anybody who's at an early stage of Islam, they are massively beneficial for him. The problem is a bit later on, as you start to develop and understand, they're kind of counterproductive to growth. So it's not that they don't encourage, they actually discourage sometimes people learning and becoming free thinking, and they kind of discourage a lot of that. They have huge amounts of culture, and it is all about really just submission to the elders. These kind of things are huge drawbacks for people who are beyond the elementary stage or the early learning stage, and they're counterproductive to our kind of UK, Western, US, whatever, European lifestyle in that sense, to stop having free thought and things like this, which are crucial. The other thing I don't like as well, I will criticize if I'm to criticize things like the Tablighi Jamat, is they spread a lot of things that ain't true. And the problem with that is it sets an ontology. So they say things like, look, everything is sunnah, everything is from the deen, even going to sleep in a particular way is of the deen. They make everything Islamic. And the problem with that is that's just not true. The Prophet never told you that you got to sleep in a particular way. I mean, I remember for so long I used to sleep on one side because thinking that this is Islam. I mean, it's not Islam. I mean, look, you can sleep however you want to sleep. God damn it, if you want to spread out like a star, just spread out like a star. It's not, stop Islamizing or Islamicizing every little detail, because that becomes problematic at a later point when people are trying to reckon. So why do so many people, for example, think to wear regular clothing is not allowed? Because of views like the Tablighi Jamat had pushed into people from a very, reinforced this view that, oh, sunnah, like for one sunnah. But you see that it's the concept, the emotion behind it it's commendable, but their application to it has ruined a lot of things, because it's kind of taught people that many things which are not sunnah, they've made it sunnah. Like they've said it's sunnah to sit on the floor and eat, and it's not sunnah to sit on the floor and eat. If you want, it's permissible to sit on the floor and eat, but it's not sunnah. So I think when you start making everything part of the deen, you see, there were many things the Prophet ﷺ did because everybody around him did them. There was nothing peculiar about the Muslims doing them. So sitting on the floor and eating was just how the Arabs ate. It was nothing that, when you became Muslim, you sat on the floor and ate. All Arabs were sitting and eating like that. If you went to the kuffar of Quraysh, they would have sat and ate the same way. In fact, there are ahadith that the Prophet sat on a chair and ate. Those ahadith exist. So it's not, it's not something. But my point is that they took everything and they kind of made it into a sunnah, and that is damaging. Because now somebody's got to come along and bloody undo all of that. And it's hard work, I'm telling you, undoing learning. This is what I tell people. I say it's not, the difficult struggle isn't actually to learn. The difficult struggle is more often than not to unlearn. That's what's difficult. Hope I've answered your question. Right. Okay. Somebody asking, can a singular narration, takhsis of Quran, do we as Muslims have to follow the government ruling? I mean, I'm not sure what that means actually. If you're asking me ruling as in the law, I mean, come on. Do you seriously expect me to say anything different? Then of course you have to follow the law. Come on. Are you onto my criminal activity or something? I'm only messing. But Mufti Qareeb. Ahlan wa sahlan, khushamadid. Somebody, once again, people, Mufti Qareeb, currently residing in the States. Somebody who studied with us in Binoria in Pakistan. Honor to have you on here. Right, Salam from us. There are three valid schools of Aqidah. Alright, this is going to be a lengthy one. What is the difference between Athari and Maturidi? That's going to be long, I don't think I'll be able to tackle that. The difference, very briefly, is to do with a sense of literalism. Allah mentions things in the Quran, not whilst teaching you Aqidah. He just mentions them in general when teaching you something or making a point about something. And are they to be points of Aqidah as well? So, for example, let me give you a very decent example. If I was to say to you, and this is a common thing, so growing up, for example, as a child, I was told this, before learning any Aqidah or anything, I was told that life and death are in the hands of Allah. Okay. Now, and I've always, and we all believe that. The question is, from that, what most people, 99% of everybody that heard that would have understood from what I just said, that Allah controls when we die and how we live, and we shouldn't be too kind of caught up about these things. We should accept and submit to that. I think 0.1% or maybe 1% of people, if that, I think would have understood from what I'm trying to say is that Allah has hands. That really sums up this whole debate of what is the difference between these schools. So because I used the statement, life and death are in the hands of Allah, you see, as a child growing up, I almost never even heard that. Like, I heard it, but what only registered was the fact that Allah is controlling life and death. So this group generally, the Hanabila traditionally, or the modern day Salafiyah, have this belief that they're usually quite forceful about, that we have to believe that Allah has hands and He has these things and He has 1 foot and He has 2 fingers and He has this kind of... I mean, I actually, to be honest with you, I think in this day and age, believing that kind of stuff is... I mean, maybe due to some kind of autistic kind of way of looking at things, that maybe that only makes sense. It doesn't really make sense to me, although I'm not saying you're not a Muslim by believing that, of course. And do I consider them Ahl Sunnah? Yes, I do, because to me Ahl Sunnah is a very broad thing. It includes people of different perspectives, so I do consider them to be Ahl Sunnah, all of these views. But I just believe our beliefs towards Allah should just be simple. Like, we don't need to really, I believe in Allah full stop. I know Allah has all these names, and that's how I learn Him. Allah says, وَلِلَّهِ الْأَسْمَاءُ الْحُسْنَى. Allah has these amazing, beautiful names, and that's how we know Him. People say, does He have this attribute? Allah never told us that He has these kind of things, and so why do we need to really get into it? They say, yeah, but are you going to say Allah has hands and Allah has... Yeah, but, do I really need to say that to be a Muslim, to believe in Allah? I don't need to say that. So... yeah, but aren't you going to say that Allah has anger? He gets angry. Look, I believe in Allah full stop. You know what I mean? I mean, everybody just understands Allah. They understand Him through His names, and that's how we understand Him. And they have an intuitive understanding of Allah. I don't need to kind of start describing Him in all these human-like kind of characteristics and then end it off by saying, oh, but don't think of a human. I mean, that's a bit silly, isn't it? If I say to you, pink elephants, but don't think of a pink elephant. Obviously, you're going to think of a pink elephant. Like, when I say, oh, Allah has all these things, but not like the way humans have them, then but you can't help but think of them in that way. Because that's the only reference you have for that. You know what I mean? If I keep saying hand, you're only going to think of a human hand, like, because that's the mental point of reference. But then I say, but don't think of a human hand. But it's too late now, bro. Should have told me that before. So there is that thing, when you draw this kind of picture, because, in some of these books they write, and and they get so passionate about this, you have to believe Allah has, and He laughs, and He has 1 leg, and He has 1 foot, and He sits, and He moves, and He has these 2 fingers, and He has 2 hands, but they're both right hands, and it's like, what on earth are you... Bro, I don't worship whatever you're just describing there, man. Sorry, man. I can't... I am not going to be... That's not the way that's not how I understand Allah. I just understand Allah as the greatest being that there is, the transcendent I can never understand him. I'm not going to describe him with those words, I'm sorry, because if I describe him with that, he's going to appear as some kind of, it does look, I'm not lying, it appears as some disabled kind of, and then you're going to say, well, oh, why are you saying, but that's how it appears. I'm not saying you're saying that. I just want to clarify, I'm not saying that you're saying that, but it appears like that. So, anyway, there's going to be some plenty of kufr fatawa coming my right, there goes my chances of leading Salah in the Haram now. Don't think that was going to happen anyway, to be honest. Cigarettes allowed. There's a difference of opinion generally. I think, in my understanding, I would think smoking is makruh. But some people say it's haram because of the harm and stuff, but because it's such a long processed haram, it's like saying eating fatty foods maybe or something. I don't know, but in my understanding, I would probably be with the ulema who say it's makruh, discouraged. Right, guys, I think we should start wrapping it up now because it's coming to. I've only got a few minutes left, and Alex, appreciate it, man. Shukran. The love is mutual. Let me try and see anything. Is it okay to swear? I've heard you say. You see, my understanding, I don't believe it's haram to use swears. That's my understanding. I believe it's haram to insult people. There's a difference. As part of general language, it's not good etiquettes. It may be discouraged, and it may be strongly discouraged based on the setting that you're in. First of all, words like goddamn, I don't even think they qualify as swears. But actual swears, like if somebody did say the F word, I think that's subject to your context. I don't think it's personally haram, subject to context. Obviously, if you stood in a masjid and said it, I think that would be haram based on the fact that you're just stupid. Or I should have said because you're an effing idiot. But you see, these words, when you look at the Sahaba, swears, there's an interesting lecture by Professor Steve Pinker, who is a student of Noam Chomsky on language. And I think you should really YouTube it. It's to do with swears and how they develop and evolve. And historically, a lot of swears, because sex wasn't the taboo historically. When I say historically, like in the time of the Prophet, at that time things like disease and calamities and damnation were the kind of taboo, and hence a lot of their swears revolve around that. So you hear the Sahaba will say in their language stuff like like tabban and like, which means damn, or they will say things like thakilatki ummuk, may your mother be may you die and your mother suffer as a consequence. I mean, that's a horrible thing to say to somebody. May you die and your mother suffer this kind of bereaving as a result. Or they would say to some women, may you get a disease where you lose all your hair and you do this, and halqa, and may you become get this kind of disease, and that's a horrible thing. But but because these words lost their meaning, they became like just common, like what people would just say, like a bit like the swear words today, like sucks, which is a common word for Americans. They use it all the time. This sucks. Sucks does come from the actual sexual thing. I mean, if they think it doesn't, they just need to check it up. Just Google it. That's where the word actually originates from. And the word like screws something. Oh, I got screwed. Like this comes from the original, but it lost its meaning. So I think like that. That's my understanding. People may disagree with me, and I respectfully accept that. God damn it. No, I do. I respect them. And etiquette is most important. So please do not quote me out of context, right? Swearing where it does not belong in that context would be categorically wrong. Okay. Right, people, I'm coming towards the end. I've got a few seconds left. I totally, absolutely love all your support and, all the kind words that you've been sharing. Shukran. All right, barakallahu feekum. If you do want to stay in touch, I will be doing more of these. Snap me. I'm regularly on Snapchat. Add me. It's Malm 2014. Maybe somebody can write it and share it on the. I can't seem to write from here. That's MALM 2014. I do respond to a lot of questions on that. I am quite responsive on Snapchat. So inshallah, add me and shukran, stay in touch. Barakallahu feekum. Do engage in your studies. As I always say, live, love, laugh and learn, inshallah. Once again, as always, it's been a pleasure. Take care of yourselves. Remember me in your du'as. Over and out, people. Assalamu alaikum.